Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to humour, whether you spell that with a U or without a U. I've just realised both versions have a U. I'm talking about the second U that we use in British English. And right now I am seeing a lot of people during this pandemic turning to humour, which is, quite a human reaction. I mean, after all, in the Great Plague, a lot of the doctors turned to four of them. It helps us cope. It helps me cope. That's particularly why I'm using it, or at least my brand of it. But humour is divisive, right? It is subjective, as you can see from the comment section of my YouTube videos. And so this video isn't really that easy to do, since people do have different opinions on what is funny. But as best as I can, I wanted to dispel a few myths about American humour, spelled like this, and also to confirm some. American humour, what is it? Well, I mean, it's hard to encapsulate in a sentence, isn't it? You'd have to write an entire book, and I'm not going to do that right here, right now. I haven't got the time or the energy, nor do you, to read it. This is just a quick video. But today I just want to talk about some of the myths that are directed at American humour, particularly on the part of my know-all British compatriots. It's often said that in a sort of televisual manner, American humour is just sort of sight gags, catchphrases, and laughter track-based comedy, and I don't think that's entirely true. And I have a few more things to say on that. I should say that I'm not myself a big fan of that kind of comedy, okay? And this is probably going to get me a lot of hate, but I'm not a big fan of like Friends or The Big Bang Theory or cable news. But the fact of the matter is a lot of people are fans of those shows, and they're not just fans of those shows in the United States, but also in Britain. So the things that you are deriding are nonetheless popular in your country. And, the laughter track comedy that we've had in England over the years hasn't just been American based, far from it. I mean, we've had our own brand of it. You just look at the likes of Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, or Fawlty Towers, or Mr. Bean. I mean, most of the ones that came before the year 2000. And even after then, some shows still didn't get the memo that, you don't need a laughter track. People know when to laugh, and it makes it more awkward if you don't have the laughter track. And anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. The point is that both countries have easy kind of laughter track comedies. So it's sort of, there is an even balance of that, I would say, on either side of the pond. And something else that I think both countries have is also an absence of laughter track comedy. I mean, you could look at, say, The Office in Britain. You could also look at sort of latter day Alan Partridge, although some of his early stuff was laughter track driven. Just as there is in the Larry Sanders Show and, Curb Your Enthusiasm in the United States. Also the American version of The Office. And in fact, both countries have kind of predominantly moved away from laughter track driven humour. Another thing that British people tend to level at Americans is that they don't have a sense of irony or sarcasm. And I don't think this is entirely true. In fact, I think it's completely untrue. They may have a different sense of those things than we do in England, or that there are nuances between how both countries sort of handle that kind of thing. But to say that they have no sense of irony or sarcasm would be a complete falsity. I mean, anybody who's read The Onion will know that. Here's a powerful example of how The Onion uses irony and sarcasm during even times of crisis like a pandemic to highlight a wider issue. Actually, that's not The Onion. That is a piece that I wrote about 11 years ago for a now defunct satirical website that was basically a rip-off of The Onion. If you didn't get the joke, it wasn't sort of laughing at the fact that millions of pigs had died. It was laughing at the fact that the media concentrated on the human death toll, and I was concentrating on the fact that there were more animals that had died as a result. It's grim, and it probably needs work, and actually now it's outdated, so never mind. But in order for this joke to work, I kind of had to write in the style of The Onion, because I knew that that worked with an American audience. And back then, I didn't have the thousands of followers that I have now. I had about 6. Now, I think that The Onion is particularly strong on its irony, but when it comes to sarcasm, American humour is not devoid of that whatsoever. I mean, look at Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think that's a fine example of somebody that uses sarcasm, or just sort of says the things that are on our mind. It's kind of Alan Partridge-y in a way. And for those of you Americans, perhaps, who don't know who Alan Partridge is, he's a British comedy character that it's sort of fly-on-the-wall documentary-esque or mockumentary-esque, as you might see in Curb Your Enthusiasm. And he sort of also says things that are on his mind that sometimes we wish we could say. Like Larry, he has worked in the television industry and he speaks like this. He doesn't do this with his mouth, though. I don't know why I do. It's just, it's a reflex action. And sort of Alan Partridge is a decent example of somebody who's a bit of a loser. We like loser type characters, or at least characters that commonly get their comeuppance, right? So think of Edmund Blackadder in Blackadder. Think of Basil Fawlty in Fawlty Towers, etc., etc. But in American comedy, it seems like often that the person that's in the lead role in the comedies is quite a successful person, right? They have a fall down from grace that's quite high up. Think of Frasier, think of Larry David, think of people like that. Whereas in British comedy, you've got someone like Basil Fawlty who's running a not very good hotel in Torquay. It's not the glitz and glamour, right? You've got David Brent working in an office, and I know that was replicated in the American office, which, for the record, is not bad. This whole debate over which is better, the British or American office, I think they both have, strong points to them. I do prefer the British one, only because I came across that one first. But the American one I think it's fine. I really do. But, I think David Brent, another example of someone who's in a sort of low status, higher up position. And there's nothing quite that glamorous about him. And maybe this speaks to the differences in society in Britain and in the United States. In the United States, anyone can run for president. And in Britain, we are often governed by a sense of self-deprecation. It's good to be self-deprecating. That's sort of a virtue almost. Whereas in America, it's less good to be that. It's seen as less desirable to be apologetic needlessly. And so I think that sort of thing often comes across in the central characters in the lead roles of American comedies. And it still works because it's still talking to kind of American norms in that sense. And I've always got it. Now, don't get me wrong, me sort of defending American comedy in this respect doesn't mean there aren't American comedies that I either don't like or I think are overrated. There are plenty of them, and I'm happy to get to those here in a bit. Actually, I'll get to them now. I don't really find Saturday Night Live that funny. But then again, I've not really ever been a big fan of sketch shows, unless ones that are done cleverly. Big Train, for example, that was a Simon Pegg vehicle. That was done pretty well, I think, although it tended to repeat jokes again and again. And I think a lot of the British sketch shows have done that, and often in a catchphrase type way. I'm thinking of the Catherine Tate show, Am I Bothered, and all of that. Little Britain did something similar. But Saturday Night Live, just like those shows, isn't so much my cup of tea. I must say, and I don't want this to get too sort of opinionated because I understand everybody has their sort of viewpoints on things, but I must say that I think my favourite comedies are those ones that blend comedy with pathos or with a sense of drama. I think that the British Office does that really well. And I think if I was to say anything about American comedy in that sense, I don't think there's often a focus on that side of things. I think it's often pure comedy, often sort of overlooks the emotional or sentimental sense that can often, make something a little more powerful. This one is less dispelling of a myth, but more kind of an observation. And again, one that speaks to our societal makeups, I think, is the production values of comedies. It always feels that, American comedies look a bit sharper, maybe. They're more studio produced, but there's just a better zest, a better colour to them. That's probably going too far. I don't know the technical term. It looks like more money went into it, whereas in Britain, we're quite happy to just stick people on a sofa in a dingy, dark room and have them, just talk about very normal things like in The Royal Family. And, one difference I've noticed, and I think you really notice this when you live in the United States, is that the United States isn't as given to toilet humour as the Brits are. That's part of our everyday speech. To make puns on, sex or drinking or toilets, not literally on the toilet, although I have been known to in the cubicles. Not in the United States, I'd be deported. That's probably not true. But, whenever I've tried to sort of have that kind of humour with Americans here, they seem less receptive to it. And that's fine. It's just, I think I was born and bred to be a dirty little, I often tell those kind of jokes here on YouTube, and I can't tell if people like them or not. I mean, my upvote to downvote ratio does suggest I'm fine. And it could be just a Midwest thing. I mean, that's where I've lived. And maybe on the coasts, you're very potty-mouthed. I don't know. I'm not going to pass a judgment call. You do that. And let me know in the comments below if you're a big fan of innuendo. Actually, very quickly, while we're on the subject of just regular people and not TV shows themselves, I think there are subtle differences between humour in conversation in Britain and humour in conversation in America. For instance, I think it's fairly well known that in Britain, we like to poke fun at each other, right? I might call my best friend a wanker, and he'll be fine with that. I mean, in theory, he'll laugh. Whereas if you did something with an equivalent insult here in the United States, you might get punched in the teeth, which, you know, the joke's on you in that case, because I'm British. I think overall that doesn't sort of translate over here. Hey, wife, you big jackass, can you pass me some tea?
No.
Why?
Who's the jackass?
She doesn't get it. She thinks that's a TV show. It's an insult as well. And I'd never call my wife that in real life. It was just for televisual purposes, comedy.
You're not getting any...
Get it myself. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below where you stand on American humour, and don't say it's face. A big reminder, if you would like to follow more of these kinds of observations, you can do so on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions, so long as you don't send them at 3 in the morning. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. And of course, as ever, a huge shout out to all my patrons who make this channel possible. It's very important during this sort of lockdown time that I have my patrons. You're helping to keep this channel afloat, shall we say, and we really, really do appreciate it. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until next time, keep making those jokes to your family unless they're not funny, because then, you know, you'll get kicked out of the house. That's not good at this moment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching this episode of Lost in the Pond. Don't forget to hit my stupid little face to subscribe, and please share this video with the world. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook, and if you would like to support this channel, please do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond.